Hello, hello, hello out there to all of you beautiful Black podcasters. My name is Latrice Sampson Richards. I am the host of the 2023 Black Podcasting Awards. And as usual, I am super freaking excited to be here with y'all today. Y'all know I always enjoy when I get an opportunity to come and talk and be in community with other Black podcasters. And today I have an opportunity to learn about someone new. So I'm very excited about that. I am joined today by our 2022 Best Black Business Podcast winner, Stevon Lewis. Stevon is the host of the How to Talk to High Achievers About Anything podcast. And he also a therapist like me. So y'all know this conversation about to be real, real good. Hi, Stevon. Welcome so much. Thank you for joining
Hello,
us.
Latrice. Thanks for having me on here. I'm happy to be here. This is going to be
Yes.
fun.
It is, it is. I always get excited. And you know what? I am actually I'm like literally excited. I don't just be saying stuff. I think sometimes people think I just be saying stuff, but I don't. I really am excited because I am the only therapist that I know that like is for real podcasting. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot, like you might have everybody got a podcast these days. Everybody got a podcast,
Facts.
right?
Facts.
And the number of phone calls that I get from people talking about I want to start a podcast is, it's kind of ridiculous. But to be a therapist and also a for real podcaster, like someone who takes podcasting seriously, who really sees the skill sets that can be that can be lent from psychotherapy
Mhm.
into podcasting. I get excited about that. I kind of nerd out because it's like two of my favorite things. So how did you get into podcasting?
So it's like I've got to like now fight being an imposter here because I moonlight as a podcaster, right? Like
Okay.
I
All
have the
right.
talent. No. So yeah, podcasting. I mean, I've been obviously kind of on several podcasts, just during the course of my career, speaking and stuff. I do a lot of that. And the way I kind of got to my podcast was I was actually on the flagship podcast, How to Talk to Mommy and Poppy, for LWC Studios. And during
Mm.
the course of that interview, the host and executive director, Juleka Lantigua, kind of stopped the show or recording for a minute and said, "Hey, I need to talk to you about something after we finish recording. So like, don't hop off." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, that got weird, but this never happened to me before." So then, after we finished recording, she's like, "Yeah, I've got a crazy idea. I don't have any paperwork, but we got to get you a podcast." And I was like, "Huh, interesting," because people have said like, get a podcast, but it's like you said, you truly do podcasting. I moonlight because I only show up and I just talk, right? I don't do
Mm.
any of the behind the scenes. I'm not editing. And probably that's the reason why I never had a podcast before, because I wasn't going to do all that stuff. I know
Yeah,
my
yeah.
lane, therapist, that's where I feel comfortable. I don't want to learn all the, ins and outs of actually doing podcasting. And so, when she approached me with that, I was like, all right, for sure. If you guys are going to do everything, I'll be down to do it. And so that's how I kind of got, caught doing how to talk to high achievers.
Well, listen, don't you started off talking about that imposter syndrome. Yes. And we're gonna come back around to that because the High Achievers podcast, it really kind of centers around imposter syndrome and how to overcome that, et cetera, et cetera. So you like, you're an expert on the cool, right?
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
we're
yeah.
gonna make sure that we come back around to that. But kind of similar to the conversation that we was having right before we started recording, it's like, I think we a lot of times as podcasters, no matter what level you are in your podcasting journey, we have a tendency to kind of discredit or like minimize
Mhm.
what we bring to the table. Let me tell you, hosting a podcast is not easy like that. It's not nothing, and so being able to just from a regular interview for
Mhm.
Jaleka, shout out to Jaleka, for Jaleka to reach out to you, somebody who does do podcasting and who does, like this is her thing, for her to say, hey, there's something there, there's something in that voice, there's something in that delivery, there's something there that we believe we could take to the next level. Don't count that out now, Stevon. Don't count that out.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, inner bully will try to get you to believe that stuff, but I'm my own fan, so always believe that I can do something. It's just a matter of how I'm going to execute that. And so I really kind of operate from a place of being efficient. I try to produce the most results with the least amount of kind of uh, export or output of energy. So
Yeah.
yeah, when she
Okay.
approached me with that, and like you said, she's in her field, been doing podcasting, been hosting, kind of doing this whole realm is kind of it's her jam. And so if she sees something in me to be able to kind of do this, I'm a believer 100%. And also again thinking that I've been on podcasts, so it couldn't be too much different from being a guest to kind of hosting. There's some difference, a lot of difference actually. But pick it up and you run with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So talk to us about how to talk to high achievers about anything. What is the podcast? I know we kind of touched on it a little bit, but what is the podcast about and what is it that you're hoping to accomplish by creating this content?
For sure. Thank you. That's a great question. How to Talk to High Achievers is a podcast about people doing amazing things, and Black and Brown strivers is what we call them. So, people of color doing amazing things in the world who oftentimes have to overcome different barriers that maybe some of their counterparts wouldn't have to kind of get to the success that they've attained. And the podcast really centers around some of the real barriers, and then some of the barriers that are created in their mind, kind of psychologically. And I kind of talk about like, hey, here's how you might want to address that issue, or how you would, ought to see this or reframe this kind of perception that you have about that. And so the goal really with the podcast is to kind of broaden this conversation, to bring it more public, to make it more public, so that it's people don't feel so isolated. So I think
Mhm.
that there are many people that look like you and I that are out in the world doing amazing things. Maybe have a difficult time kind of connecting to it, or believing their own hype, or because like how we were just speaking a little bit before we got on air, was the idea of like you wear all the hats, so then like which hat is really yours, and saying like what, you can own all of them, you can own all
Yeah.
those hats and be proud about what you do in every lane that you run in, and you're supposed to be doing that stuff, especially if you're getting really good results. And so I want to kind of broaden that conversation, so that people don't feel so isolated when you look around the space and you're saying, well, I'm the only one doing this, or that I didn't even know black podcasting was like a genre of things, that like you think it's the greater kind of scope of podcasting being the whole kind of form. And if I'm not, say, Brene Brown, or
Mhm.
somebody who has this super high platform, a Jay Shetty or something like that, then do I fit in? And it's like, no, you have space, and maybe people aren't going to give you voice or platform to be able to showcase it, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have value, and I need you to know that.
Absolutely. And you need to know that for yourself, like you need you to know that,
Hmm.
like you said, we talked a little bit earlier before we started recording about uh even in my own podcasting journey, like I started off as a solo podcaster, and I still consider myself a solo podcaster in a lot of ways, but I kind of have moved into production. And so, like, producing for other folks and things like that, like just gradually building my career. It's still my side hustle, but just gradually building this career in a way that feels right to me. But in the beginning, I literally did everything for my podcast. My first podcast was called Unicorns Talk Podcast. And at that time, when I first got started, I was still figuring it out. I was, trying to get a handle on what the terminology was, excuse me, what was the best equipment to use, and like figuring out my skill sets and things like that. But in the process of doing that, I really was wearing all of the hats because I didn't have the money to pay somebody to do those things for me. So I had to learn how, not only how to produce the show, in terms of coming up with the topics and booking the guests and et cetera,
Hmm.
et cetera, but then also I had to figure out how to edit that thing, and then to edit it to my standards because I am a high achiever,
Hmm.
So if you listen back to some of those early episodes, I'm like, girl, I don't know about that, but I leave them up because it's good content. But my skills have definitely improved since then. I did my own sound design. I made my own graphics. I created my logo
Ooh,
for
wait.
my for for everything. I think I've only paid for a logo once in my life, and I've had several. So it's like I was wearing all of these different hats. But if somebody was to ask me, like, are you a podcaster, or do you consider yourself a professional podcaster, or even, taking it a step further in terms of making it relevant to
Hmm.
this conversation, the idea of being awarded
Hmm.
for having done those things, like, it could not have been further from my mind, because in my mind, I'm doing this because I don't have a choice. Like, I
There you
have
go.
to do these things. And so I think in a lot of ways I minimized
Hmm.
what it was, like the magnitude of what I was actually doing, and the reality of what I was actually putting together. And so when you talk about imposter syndrome, can you talk a little bit about it from that aspect, in terms of not necessarily just thinking that, or feeling like you can't do it, or you're not worthy of, or et cetera, but not even recognizing the
Hmm.
work that you're putting in?
Yes, 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 yes. Your insight is amazing. I tend to forget that I'm speaking to another clinician, so
Y'all know
it's
I'm a
like
therapist out here. I am licensed in
a
the
hundred
state of
percent.
Florida and Louisiana. I don't know.
Oh,
I be trying to tell the folks, I don't know if they be remembering, but the girl is licensed.
oh,
Anyway, go ahead.
dialed all the way in, everybody. Dialed all the way in. And so when I'm listening to you, I'm like, oh, there it is, like the language. And I think you're hitting on a kind of subset of what I see kind of imposter syndrome with high achievers, is when stuff comes out of a place of necessity, we don't see it as an accomplishment, right?
Mhm,
Because there wasn't any other option. And I think for you, you're saying, well, I was a solo podcaster and I had to do all the things because I had no other choice. Or even
mhm,
calling it a side hustle. And I'm saying, like, well, you just have two different jobs. I don't know that it's a side hustle. Like, it may not, make monetarily, garner kind of what
mhm,
you're getting from the therapy side, but that doesn't mean that it's less in value, or the
mhm,
contribution or the work is decreased. So yeah, I think that part of what happens is that as high achievers, and when you have to do all the things, that somehow that means that you don't have what it takes, or that what you're doing isn't of significance, because if you were, then you'd have all the resources, you'd have everything you would want and need to be able to kind of just thrive. And I
mhm,
think it's the overcoming of those hurdles, because those are real hurdles that we talk about, right? Like, you have to
mhm,
overcome the fact that you don't have a graphic designer, that you don't have an editor or a producer, and you have to manage all that stuff in your head. And I'm saying, well, that's a much larger accomplishment, from a standpoint of where I'm like, I get to show up and just be myself, right? I don't have
mhm.
to contend with any of those things as a podcaster. I just show up and they're like, be Stevon. And I'm like, cool, I can do that on a daily basis. Anytime I could wake up and be me.
It's
I
my
don't have
favorite thing to be.
right, exactly, exactly. I don't have to do all the things. And meanwhile, you're hosting a show. You're also thinking about, hey, I've got to, make this conversation flow. But also, are we doing things in a way that we're going to be able to edit this perfectly later? Are we
Mhm,
going to be able to kind of, move the conversation along at the speed it needs to be? Where am I on time? Like, you're keeping
mhm,
all this stuff active in your head. And for you, then that separates you from being able to kind of connect with all the stuff you're doing. And I think that that's true for a lot of people who are, look like us, that are out doing amazing things, and especially in this kind of podcasting world of kind of, entertainment. And you're doing so many things that you never really sit and have the opportunity to kind of connect to all the things you're doing and feel accomplished in all of them.
mhm.
Because what time do you have? You go from hosting the show to, well, now we got to start editing it, and then I got to like find the next guest. It's like, well, there's no time to celebrate anything you've done.
Yeah, yeah. It gets rough, especially when life starts to happen. I
Mhm.
ran into my dad passed away at the end of January,
Oh,
and that was it was devastating, to say the least. And I don't know that I was necessarily prepared, not that anybody could be prepared, but I really was not prepared for the impact that it would have on my ability to function,
mhm.
and like to really get into, or like to enjoy and complete my creative tasks the way that I was used to being able to complete that. And one of the things I've spoken about this a few times, one of the things that I have been so very, very grateful for as I go through this journey, not just of, healing and grieving, but in this podcasting journey, as I go through this journey of figuring out what my place is in this industry and what it is that I want to accomplish, I am so grateful for the Black podcasting community,
Mhm.
because this community, the people that I have been able to connect with and form real world, real life relationships with as a result of my work, those people really supported me, rallied around me, and helped to remind me, like, you are that bitch, like, you that bitch
Mhm.
girl, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like, don't
Mhm.
get it twisted, because I was just like, oh my God, I can't even think. And I have a couple projects that I was working on at the time that I actually was getting paid to work
Oh
on,
yeah, yeah.
and it was like, I was, I can't focus, I can't get it. And they were like, girl, I ain't worried about you. You're gonna be okay. Do what you need to do to take care of yourself. And so, talk a little bit about being a part of, or being in community with other like-minded folks, and how that can help when you are going through times of dealing with imposter syndrome.
For sure. And so thanks for, sharing kind of all of that, because I think if you don't have a reference for grief and the roller coaster that it is, it's on the one side, like being a clinician, when you're supporting someone else going through it, it's different from when you're experiencing it yourself, and you're like,
Listen,
I barely have zero energy to get out and do
listen.
anything. Like I am operating at a bare minimum. Like
Yes,
I showed up
yes.
here, but I ain't really here. And I
I'm
think
not,
that
and would rather not be here.
that part, and like because we work with people, and because people count on you to show up and be things, it feels kind of guilty, because you're like, yeah, I don't want to be here supporting
Mhm,
you. Like I can barely support me. And so
mhm,
I that that resonated with me, because experiencing some bit of my own grief over the last few years as well, with
mhm.
folks. But yeah, like I think in that space, it's really difficult sometimes to kind of push through and still be able to show up. And community is super super important, for that. Like I believe, and I don't know where you stand on it, but like energy is transferable. And so like
Oh,
if I'm
yes.
around folks who are continuing to do things, and I think you probably this will resonate with you as a high achiever, is when people are continuing to go out in the world and push and do great things, it motivates me. It
Mhm,
makes me say, like, I don't feel bad. I don't guilt myself. I don't shame myself. It says, oh, I'm excited now. Like that person is doing some stuff. I'm super hyped about that. I'm geeked about it. Yo, like let's go, Stevon. Like let's get loose,
mhm,
right? And so it motivates me to kind of show up and be the best version of myself, and push and do all the things I know I can do. So community is really important. So when you're talking about kind of being in this podcasting space, it's always helpful to see somebody else that's looks like you, that's accomplishing stuff, getting great guests, having open conversations that are meaningful and powerful. And you're like, okay, I'm a student of the game, right? So like I'm watching podcasts and I'm saying, oh, I like the way that this host said this, or oh, I like the way they promoted this thing. And so I'm going back to, hey, you think we could do XYZ? Or next time I'm on the mic, I'm like, all right, so I'm gonna try to do this thing to add it to my
yes.
repertoire, because we pushing forward. But that community is huge. I mean, they support you, they big up you, they put your stuff out, they share it. And to see them kind of grind into, and like you hear the backstory, because you'll start to have conversations and make relationships with folks, and you realize like this game is not simple.
Mhm,
People show up and they make it look like, oh, this is easy. We get on here and we just having a conversation. Like you don't get to see the behind the scenes unless you really work with somebody like that, right? So I'll show up and like before we go on air, like you and I'll have conversation, or if I'm with somebody else, we'll have conversation, and you see like all the prep work. You see them, talking about commands outside to people. Hey, or do we have this ready? All right, and when we get to this point, we're gonna do, a drop, or we're gonna do an ad or whatever. And you say like, this is a work. This is work. It's
Yes.
not just two people showing up having a conversation, which I think will resonate for both of us in the way of, just like therapy isn't just me showing up talking about stuff. Like I'm doing
Yes.
something with the information that's being given to me, and I'm using a lens or a style of therapy to then, you take that information, give it back to you so that you can do something with it. And same thing with podcasting, or like being this, like, it's not just a conversation. We don't just plug in a mic and we just start chatting about stuff. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a flow to the show. There is a format. There is a structure. And all
Mm-hmm.
that takes work. And you don't understand that, like, there's a lot of, blood, sweat, and tears that get put into this.
Absolutely. Take us back to the moment that you found out that you won. Right? Because so for those who don't know, a little bit of the behind the scenes is that we kind of record the names of all of the nominees in advance, and nobody knows who the winners are until the show airs. So even me as the host did not know who the winners are until the show aired, right? And
Hmm.
so, which is always that's exciting, right? Because then I get to like experience that moment with you. So I can imagine that being, the name that's being called, like hearing your podcast being named as the winner, that must be an amazing experience. So take us through that moment when you realized or became aware
Hmm.
that you won a Black Podcasting Award.
So it's bananas for me because this is all happening really, really quickly. And
Mhm.
I know I'm gonna, I get on people about saying like, don't put this time frame on how things can happen for you. But seriously, we started this podcast, back in 2020. I'll say like talking about it 2021, recording stuff, 2022. So in putting it out, like, for us to get, nominated for anything, it's like we the new kids on the block, right? And like,
Mhm.
not that I don't think we don't have a dope product, right? Because I think what I do, I try to really do a really good job. I think I'm dope. But there's also the part of I'm like a turtle. And so I'm like, I'm learning how to do this thing. Sure, we're gonna win awards, but I'm not thinking first, kind of year out or
Mhm.
season out. And so like when it happens, like, wait, what? Like, one, I'm geeked that people listening to it. Two, I'm like loving the fact that it's having the value and impact that I hoped it had, that Jalika had the vision for, that she thought would have, it would have. And then like to hear your name, you're like, yo, this is confirmation. Like my folks love this and what we doing. Like we got to keep hitting them with like more stuff. Like we got to keep getting that workout, right? And so it's just, mind blowing because it's happening so quickly for me. And I don't think
Mhm.
people, really understand. And maybe this is, part of for you is like you make things look easy because you've been doing this, right? So sure,
Mhm.
I've been on tons of podcasts over the years, and I do a lot of public speaking, and I've done this work with imposter syndrome, so I'm really well versed in all that stuff. Also, we just started this podcast. So it's like, not that we can't win, but it's like, dang, like, and people hopped on immediately. I'm with it. I'm with it. Like it makes me juice. And I'm like, yo, how can we make this bigger? How can we make this more like, let's move this thing?
Yeah, and elaborate a little bit more on like the significance of really this award coming from your people. You have mentioned multiple times, like you have specifically highlighted Black and brown folks, and
Mhm.
that your work kind of centers around Black and brown folks. Like I say all the time, the information that I share is just good information. Anybody could benefit from it, but I'm talking to my people, like
100%.
I'm talking to my people. And so, expound a little bit more on the significance of winning a Black Podcasting Award and to be recognized by your community.
Right, right. That is kind of, tantamount because like you're saying is that sure, this information will be helpful for anybody. I think, anyone that is a high achiever, that sees themselves as such, that, have difficulties kind of navigating the spaces they're in, and continuing to strive towards more accomplishments. will benefit from any of the interventions and tools and stuff I discuss on my podcast. However, I'm talking to the folks that look like you and I, right? Like
Mhm.
I'm saying, yeah, it can help everybody. Also, this group right here, though, like we be needing some support sometimes, and we might not ask for it, but also, it helps for us to hear our story in someone else. And
Mhm.
so, when this is going to be another thing about Black culture, like we could be judgmental. I'm keeping 1,000 with the world,
You
right?
know it
Like.
is. It's a truth. It is a truth.
you
Yes.
hit the door, we saying stuff, immediately, right? So, to get a sign off, I feel like it's like the Apollo, right? Like, yeah, hey, the Sandman didn't come and shuffle me off the stage. Hey, we
He didn't come
won.
get you with that hook, you
He didn't.
know.
He didn't hook me. Hey, listen, we Gucci, right? So no, so the fact that like it's us and like again a group of your peers, your community is saying, hey, what you're putting out is dope, and I'm like, yo, because I know y'all don't just gas anybody up. Like you got to really have it. People.
Uh-huh.
It's everything we do. So it's like you could be in church, somebody singing in the choir. Well, they don't have it. We'll be in church judging. Like it doesn't stop. So so for us to really like get on and really support and really mess with me, like, hey, that's a win. It's a legit win. Like I know that's like 100,000% like honest.
Yes, yes. It really is because well, yeah, you said everything. You said everything. I'm looking at my time and I got one more
See,
question I
look at
want to
you,
get.
look at you, look at
You know
you.
what
You're
I'm
doing all
saying?
the things right now.
Yeah, I be multitasking, okay?
Uh-huh.
So so what has been the impact to your career, to your podcast, whether that's downloads, sponsorship opportunities, or even just relationship building, et cetera, et cetera? Like, what has been the impact to you and or to your brand, your show, in now being able to call yourself forever and ever
Mhm.
for the rest of all time? It can never be taken away from you that you are an award-winning podcaster.
Yeah.
What has that impact, that real world tangible impact been like for you?
Right. Yeah. It's been amazing, right? I think for me being a high achiever and then to win the award, it really propels me. It pushes me to do more. And so I've kind of created a journal that I sell now. Uh, Call it like a journal workbook for
Mhm,
imposter syndrome. And so like really getting more products out, it makes me think more about how am I going to get this message out to a larger platform. We've
mhm.
started working on trying to kind of maybe incorporate video with the podcast, and so we're talking about how to grow it as well, and getting finding the right kind of sponsorship. So like you talk about sponsorships, people will want to throw money at you. Also, you got to be diligent about evaluating and being curious about who those folks are and what
They
the, the
say
the
not
goal
all
is.
money ain't good money.
Hey, real talk, real talk, real talk. So we've had some inquiries, and also we've kind of passed on some stuff because it doesn't really align. And I'm not really trying to sell what I'm doing just because it's an opportunity to make some money.
Mm,
But yeah, no, I think the real world impact is like people are listening. Like I'll get like DMs from people on Instagram that I have no other outworldly connection to that talk about the podcast. There are people who just tangibly, like a friend will say, hey, this person said they listened to your podcast, and I was like, hey, I know him. And it's like, wow, that's so bananas, right? Like who knew? And so it's the word is getting out there, and it's kind of amazing. Like sometimes I have to like just sit with him, like, yo, like you doing this, bro? Like you really out here doing this, and it's hitting the way it's supposed to hit.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a lot of times people don't Black people in particular, the community, they we don't always understand that these types of awards and this type of recognition, it really can have tangible benefit in the real world, in your life, and to your bottom line, you know.
Hmm.
Being able to, if you are creating quality content, if you are, really showing up as your true authentic self and putting yourself out there, and being recognized by your people by winning a Black Podcasting Award, it can really help to propel whatever it is that you have going on. Because, like I said, forever and ever, you will always be an award-winning podcast producer, or excuse me, podcast host.
Hmm.
And so that's a distinction that you can use if you are strategic, which I think we need to, it ain't, if ain't nobody else strategic, Black folk know
Hey,
how to be strategic.
listen,
Okay.
listen. We gonna
Who
leverage
else gonna
whatever
take
we
a pig
got.
foot and make a whole meal out of that thing? Let's be
That
real.
that other
Okay.
people now also want to eat.
It paying 40 and $50 for some pig
Listen,
feet, you know? Not that, but
listen.
I actually don't really like pig
Me
feet
either.
that
I
much, but
never.
you get what I'm saying.
I follow 100%, 100%,
You
100%.
understand what the vibe is, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And so, putting ourselves in position to be able to share with the world our gifts and our talents, being able to build our brands, being able to become as self sufficient as possible. It really all starts with having the courage to kind of put yourself out there and apply for these types of accolades and these types of awards. Because the reality is that, for as much as I love doing the work, the world wants to know that somebody else thinks I'm good at it. You know
Mhm,
what I'm saying?
mhm.
And so more opportunities come when I'm able to say, see, it's not just me saying that I'm good. It's,
Right.
the Black Podcasting Awards are saying that I'm good as well. Or, whoever else. The same thing with degrees and things like that.
You hitting on a major point. I mean, think about it. Like that word of mouth cosign is more valuable than any advertising you could purchase. I mean, think
Hmm.
about if you're at home, you have a leaky faucet. You could call any plumber you find off of Google. First thing you do is call somebody you respected. Do you have a plumber? Who do y'all use? So
Yes.
when somebody sign off on you as a podcast, hey, what podcast you listen to? Oh, I listen to Stevon, or I listen to Latrice. Like, yo, legit.
Hmm.
I'm gonna give it a real listen now, right? And I mean,
Absolutely.
like they could have found me on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, whatever. But at the end of the day, when that friend recommended, that's the one that I'm gonna give a listen to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Stevon, I have thoroughly enjoyed talking with you today. That 30 minutes goes by so
Quick,
quickly.
so quick.
Yes, it does. But I have really enjoyed talking to you today. Go ahead before we leave and let the people know how they can reach you, where they can listen to you, where they can follow and support everything you got going on.
For sure. The easiest way, I have a unique name, Stevon, Stevon Lewis. If you Google that, all my stuff comes up. That was done intentionally. Website is stevonlewis.com. I'm on Instagram at Stevon Lewis MFT. The letters Mary Francis Thomas. That's where I do most of my shenanigans. You can find me on LinkedIn, same way. And yeah, I have the journal that I have out, Silencing Your Inner Bully. It's an acknowledgement journal for imposter syndrome, available on the website, on Amazon. And I have my podcast produced by LWC Studios, How to Talk to High Achievers About Anything. You can find that on any platform where you listen to your podcast.
And correction, he has his award-winning podcast,
Hey, you know
How
what?
to
You
Talk
know
to High
what?
Achievers
A
About
hundred percent, 100%.
Because
Know about it.
because he is award winning. Yes, he
Put some
is.
respect on my
Oh, I
own
didn't even
name,
I'm
huh?
just now seeing the comments. Shout out to Shamiko. Hey, Shamiko. Hey, Al. I forgot to switch over to my comments. So we're gonna wrap it up. I did. I sorry,
All
y'all.
good. Because you got
We
all the
gonna
hats.
you listen.
All the hats.
We're gonna wrap it up today, but I want to say one thing before I say goodbye to y'all. Stevon, I'm enjoying the look that you have put together today, and I just need you to understand that the
Thank you.
little salt and pepper in the beard with the little salt and pepper in the sweater, it's a
Hmm.
vibe. It's a vibe. I
Hey,
enjoy
hey,
it.
I'm gonna
Yes.
be authentic. Hey, this is me. I'm
Yes.
this is what you got right here.
That's it. I'm learning how to embrace my little gray hairs up in the
Hmm.
front. You know
Well,
what
you
I'm
got here.
saying?
I didn't got rid of mine, but
Li- You got rid of it or it got rid of you?
It left me. It left me is what it did. We decided we were no longer in good
Like, I don't wanna
relationship.
do this anymore. I'm
Yeah,
not interested. Get
right.
somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Stevon, for joining me. This has been an amazing conversation. And, I wish you nothing but luck, nothing but success, as you continue to be a high achiever. And I'm definitely adding your podcast to my rotation. So
Thank you.
thank y'all
Thank you.
so much for joining us today. That's all we got for y'all today. Once again, my name is Latrice Sampson Richards. You can follow me on Instagram at Latrice Sampson Richards. I don't really be on Twitter like that, but if you on there, you can follow me at Rich by Marriage. And you can follow the Black Podcasting Awards at Black Pod Awards. Applications for the 2023 Black Podcasting Awards are now open. Head on over to blackpodawards.com and make sure that you apply for every category that you could possibly be eligible for, because you want to make sure that you give yourself the best opportunity to be recognized for your work. That's all we got for y'all today. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, we love y'all and we appreciate y'all. And until next time, be well. Bye, y'all.